a brand in himself, a name that has resonated within the walls of the best B schools in the world for the last 5 decades. Someone who has taken marketing mainstream. It is only apt that he is referred to as the father of modern marketing. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Red Brick Summit 2021, I welcome you all to the final session of the TRBS Speaker Series. In the second ever virtual TRBS, we are extremely honored to host Mr. Philip Kotler. Mr. Kotler received his M.A. degree in economics from the University of Chicago and his Ph.D. degree in economics from M.I.T. He has received honorary degrees from 22 universities. He is the author of 80 books and 150 journal articles. He has consulted many companies and delivered lectures in many countries, and is also the S.C.Johnson Distinguished Professor of International Marketing at the Kellogg School of Marketing. He changed the world by popularizing the concept of marketing mix. His book, Marketing Management, is referred to as the Bible of Marketing. Mr. Kotler was the first person to receive the Leader in Market Thought Award in the year 1975. He has also pioneered the field of social marketing to help individuals and groups move towards healthier and safer lifestyle. In today's session, we aim to hear more than just the 4 Ps. Without further ado, let's hear it from the man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, the father of modern marketing, Mr. Philip Kotler.
Hello. I wish I was with you in India. I've been there many times, always looking forward to being in your major cities and seeing your great culture. And we'll do it this way, thanks to Zoom. At least we have Zoom during this COVID period. I'm really going to talk about some of the books I've been writing because they represent areas that I believe have not been covered maybe. And normally I title this lecture 7 books recently written, but for the purpose I threw in 3 more books that you can see on the cover, and I will just comment briefly on them. India, of course, is a global force and has to serve the world with its products and services. And I wrote a book with my brother, Milton, who is an expert on Asia and China, particularly China. And we called it Winning Global Markets. And that is really India's challenge. China, your neighbor, they have become the factory of the world. India should be the office of the world. And they already are, because very often when I am searching for financial information or something, I'm talking to someone from India who's tied up with the company that I'm talking to. And so if any of you are planning to be global rather than domestic in your orientation, you might find some help in our book, Winning Global Markets. The second book is an older one than a recent book, but I always consulted companies and would find some missing links, some sins that they didn't cover. And they're ordinary things like writing a very bad marketing plan, forgetting to understand and define the real competitors, and of course, not being focused on the customers. So those 10 deadly sins are discussed in that book, Signs and Solutions. And I included this other book, which is finally the 16th edition of Marketing Management that just was published. We lost a little time, and yet we wanted to do something new, especially since we are in the digital revolution, and make it pretty digital and help future students and current managers get a hold of the best thinking we can put together. So with that introduction of the first slide, I will go to the other 7 books. But I want to say that I've always been impressed with the IIM universities, yours in Ahmedabad, one of the greatest places, and in the other locations as well. I believe when I introduced an Indian edition, my co-authors were at IIM, And it's just, I feel very close to all of you. Now, let me move on. I'm trying to get to my second slide, and I don't know why there's a problem. Wait, let me do that. I think I've got it. Okay, the first book that I would like to talk about is about the two main functions of marketing, of business, I should say, innovation and marketing. And I want to tell you a story, because much of marketing is storytelling. Have you heard of Fujifilm? Maybe, I bet you have, but you certainly have heard of Kodak. And you know, Kodak and Fujifilm were number 1 and 2 in the film market. What do you do as a company if suddenly that market disappears and along comes an iPhone or a smartphone or whatever with a camera and does a pretty good job? Why do you need film? Yes, of course, if it's very fine photography, you might justify having one of those special cameras. But in general, both Kodak and Fujifilm recognized that they were losing their whole market. They were going to go broke. And they did, one of them. Kodak is broke. It's over. Fujifilm is very prosperous today. What? How so? Well, so much of the credit belongs to Shigetaka Komari, the CEO, who told his 35,000 people or some number, that's in the book. He said, you can leave because we're losing our market, but you know, we have a lot of hidden treasures in Fujifilm that we never could even exploit because we were making money without effort. Now we can exploit them. These are chemical processes, imaging processes. For example, just to make color film takes 15 steps. We have solved so many problems in the process of making color film, processes that could be done and used for other purposes. So if you stick with me, and any of you want to leave the company can, we will be a winner. And sure enough, everyone stayed. This guy has got charisma and brilliance. And he invited me, and he's on the right, he invited me to write with him a book, which we call Never Stop, Winning Through Innovation. That's the theme of his company. And he has a laboratory with many projects going on, has come out with several new businesses, including one in skincare. I don't know how that relates to image making. And it's a wonderful story. But it's the story of the two major functions that Peter Drucker, the great father of management, told us about that makes a company win or lose. And they are innovation and marketing, not just one. If you innovate, but you can't sell it, there's a wonderful company called Philips. A lot of innovation, a lot of failure, poor innovation, poor marketing. I mean, great innovation, poor marketing, and they finally got the right marketing help. So what I want to say is that Drucker is right. The other functions are very important: production, finance, etc. In fact, those other functions were upset with Drucker for saying the only two important ones were innovation and marketing, and the other functions are just costs. But anyways, business got over that. And I just hope as students, managers, CEOs, you do the best job you can with innovation and marketing. Let's move on to the second book. The second book is called Brand Activism from Purpose to Action. And I wrote it with my good friend, Christian Sakar. You know, a brand generally exists to identify the maker of a product. And at best, say, show a picture of the product, mention its features, mentions its price, and mentions where you get it. You know, the 4 Ps in a sense. That's fine. It's enough in a sense. If it's done well, you'll remember there was a thing called Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Starbucks, whatever. But we believe that a brand should be more purposeful than that. In fact, should have a higher purpose, should care about much more than just the product that it makes. It should care about the ecology which surrounds the product, its use, what happens to it after it is finished as a product. Do you throw the cup or the bottle into the garbage heap? Is the manufacturer responsible for how a product is disposed, or is it government and society that has to absorb the cost? But beyond that, we want your brand to be not only active, but an activist brand. Tell us what you stand for. Are you for the environment and protecting it or not? I mean, that's the least. If we see smoke coming out of your chimney, then we don't believe you are concerned with the society as a whole. You're polluting us. And maybe there's other purposes. You know, there's a water shortage in many parts of the world. Are you doing something about that? By the way, Coca-Cola is, because no water, no Coke. Coke is spending so much money on water conservation, as they should. So if you read our book on brand activism, you'll see many, many stories and companies and what it means to be an active brand. In fact, let me add one thing. When you hear that good marketing is good storytelling, that's correct. And in fact, David Acker, one of our top professors in marketing, actually probably the father of branding, David Acker said that a brand should have a signature story, some story that you don't forget about it. You know, Disney has a story and you don't forget about it. Starbucks has a story of how it started by an American being in Italy and asking for some coffee in the morning, and he sees how it is made and he gets an idea. These great companies have a signature story. Let's move on. I wrote a book called Marketing 5.0 recently, and you might say, what is 5.0? Well, maybe I should explain 4.0. Well, 3.0. All right, I'll explain the silly way of updating our understanding of marketing without writing a new textbook. In other words, every few years, some brand new things come up, which will get into a textbook eventually. But right now, managers want to just know, for the last 3 or 4 years, what should I know happened and what can I use? So let's talk about 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 first. There was no book 1.0. There was no book 2.0. We wrote a book called Marketing 3.0 before we ever thought we were writing anything beyond that. But in writing 3.0, we wanted to say marketing has moved through 3 stages. There's all kinds of schemes about this, but what we said is if there was a book on marketing 1.0, it would be that plain book that would tell you that marketing is focused on customers and you have to create something. Your job is to create value for customers, real value. And it would just be plain old product, price, place, and promotion. So what would marketing 2.0 Well, in our book 3.0, we said 2.0 would be the recognition of the role of emotions in success in doing marketing, both in the success of consumers buying and getting what they want, and companies being successful with their emotions in producing what they're producing. What we were saying is marketing was too linear and flat. It needed to recognize that when it comes to making decisions, maybe 90% were conditioned by your emotions as a decision maker. And then you rationalized after the decision, you supplied reasons why this was the right decision to make. But you were motivated when you bought something out of maybe fear of something else happening to you, so you had to get that medicine. There's so much of us are driven by a whole stream of emotions when we make a decision. And that's what 2.0 was about. Just allowing to recognize that. And this is true of CEOs. When they make a decision, don't you think some of them are risk averse, that they will take the easier decision that has less risk, so they don't get thrown out of the company? We all are very careful and are guided by emotions. Now, so what's 3.0? 3.0 talked about the purpose of marketing is to create happy and healthy people, better people who are better, have a better life, and so on. It's a well-being philosophy. So in 3.0, in the book 3.0, we defined 3.0 as steering your own company to be producing well-being for others as a higher purpose. Now, 4.0 then was written to catch up with a lot of other things, particularly it's the book to read to recognize that marketing was going to go through a whole revolution. It would move from being a linear to a digital world, from an analog to a digital world. And it was already happening. So we were not predicting that this would happen. We were sizing up what was happening at Procter & Gamble and Unilever and a whole bunch of companies that had been putting more and more money into digitalization. So 5.0 described that. 4.0 did. Okay, I can finally tell you what we do in 5.0. We wanted to pick up all the new tools that came out of the digital revolution in marketing. In other words, the 4.0 talked about the processes of running your business with computers and with programs and so on. In 5.0, we wanted to talk a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, and how to use it. Algorithms. That's going to, in the future, many decisions in the world and in companies will be made by algorithms. Let me give you an example or two. A banker is approached by a customer who wants a loan. Normally, the banker has a lot of experience. He sort of looks at the person and does that person look dependable, and what's his history, and makes a decision out of his mind and experience. Now we can do better than that. You know what we could do? We could look at the past decisions that banker made to make a loan and see which ones were really successful and which ones weren't. What were the variables attached to those loans such that if we could add them to the decision model, make the algorithm a result of both his mind and how it works in making a loan and the success experience we've had we can make a better thing called an algorithm. Now, there's a lot of attacks now on some algorithms that they are running our lives, and we don't know what's inside of them. We can talk about that some other time. But now, not only do banks use algorithms to decide who gets the loan, but universities decide. And I know that in India, your university has so many more applicants than it can accept. It has to refuse brilliant people from going to your university because there's so many they've already said yes to. And you're using an algorithm, or probably you are using an algorithm, not just a person who had some experience deciding who to accept and who not to accept, looking at the application. Okay. Now, we not only in 5.0 talk about algorithms and AI, we talk about 3.0, we talk about virtual reality. Don't ever get into innovation by taking an idea and building the product and building the factory and sending it out to sell. It's too late. You should have taken the idea and put it into a virtual reality setting where you ask people who might be in the market for such a product to watch it, and they will get a feeling. Let's say it's a new car that you designed. You didn't make the car, but the person actually, it's done so well. The person feels he gets into the car. He hears the engine start. He feels he's driving the car. He looks at the panel and the space around him, and nothing exists. It doesn't exist. It's been put into virtual reality, and he can make a better decision now about whether he has an interest in that new product. And when the interest is strong and high, the company can build the factory and make the product. You know about that. There's other ways, other tools in Marketing 5.0. Let's move on. Wrote a book recently with two of my German and European friends, H2H marketing. Now, no one would know what H2H means unless it's spelled out, and it means human to human marketing. Isn't it true that so much of business is about people dealing with people? Yes, a president, a CEO dealing with a factory worker who works for him. If they meet, shouldn't they be person to person, really? Shouldn't every factory worker have a chance to tell the CEO, I have a very good idea for the company. May I have 5 minutes of your time? Of course. As a matter of fact, that's what Japan does. Japan is set up where any worker in any company, let's take the car companies there. Any worker can call the boss, put in a request for the boss's time, 5 minutes, to share an idea that will make the company better. Okay, but so all business is about people meeting and working with other people. Now, should people work with each other just transactionally? What about our emotions? What about our humanity? So the book, of course, is about how we are human beings, and there should be not flatness in our dealings, but respect, mutual respect, and so on. But that's a message humanists have. I happen to be, my philosophy is humanism, and that's just the way to be with people. I respect everyone. I try to create value for others, and I receive value. Anyways, the other point of H2H is it introduces the normal presentation like a textbook would be presenting on normal marketing, but it adds 3 big sections that are often missing from textbooks. The three are the following. The first is what we call design thinking. So there's a very full chapter on how marketing and design thinking are very close. That it's almost saying everyone studying marketing should also follow what's happening in a growing field called design thinking. And it's not, design thinking is not only about building skyscrapers or residential units. Design is not just about how you design the machine that does something. It's not only about packaging your product. Your package has to have good design. By the way, Japan is probably one of the best designers. It's in their blood to know how to design. They don't design just dishes and spoons and just their culture is one of being careful about beauty and design and so on. So that's in the book. The second part is all about digitalization. There's a big section about how that is turning around the practice of marketing. And the third is called service dominant logic. That's a new movement in marketing that says that most products are just vehicles for delivering services. And we should really see the service as what is moving in the universe, in the universe of transactions and so on. Everything, products are delivering solutions in the form of services to needs that you have, and it's the services that satisfy the needs. So H2H is a very good semi-textbook with three new parts to it, as well as the normal part that has to do with new things in marketing. Let me move on. I wanted to also write about social media. Wow, is that in the news today? Do you remember, did you just hear that Facebook itself had stopped for 5 hours? Something went wrong with the overloaded computers and so on. And all the talk person to person, all the advertising done by small businesses and medium businesses had stopped, and there was panic, really. But there's another thing about Facebook stopping, because they got it started again, and that is Facebook doing the right thing? Isn't Facebook possibly allowing a lot of disinformation and hatred to appear on its pages, in its talk? Shouldn't they be sort of policing some of the things that are just making people not like other people? Well, we're not going to talk about Facebook alone. This book, of course, is to help you understand Facebook, help you understand Google, understand Instagram, Pinterest, and all the other platforms. These are platforms, very successful platforms. But by the way, the book does not handle, unfortunately, the platforms in Asia. I mean, you go to China, it's WeChat. And WeChat is more than just person to person talking to each other. My God, it is a payment system. It is a savings. It's so many things. Tencent. And there's so many platforms appearing in the world. Okay, how do they work? The real question is, do they really help the marketing people? Well, the company that tried to find that out and did a wonderful job in doing it is Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble took some of its money from its huge budget, much of it spent on 30-second TV commercials. They took a chunk of money and used it instead tell their brand managers, put it into Facebook, put it into Instagram, try them out. I know we're overspending, but we won't know what works until we overspend. And I would say that maybe close to almost a half of their budget was going into experimenting with these tools, these new platforms. And they found out what worked and they found out what doesn't work. And therefore, their budget now is more normal with a good blend of traditional and digital advertising, but they know what works. And that's the problem of any company. They have to try these things out, and some don't deliver any benefit. Now, the real underlying problem really for marketing, and if any of you end up solving it, you deserve to get the billions for it, is how do you measure the ROI of marketing? The return on investment. Here I was talking about what's the return on Facebook for a particular use you made of Facebook. And what if you used several different tools? You want to be sure that you can get at the sense of what the return on each of those new digital tools was. But what about the whole campaign? What was the return on investment? So we still have to work on that. So for those of you who want to and this is an older edition. We're now in the 4th or 5th edition of this book on social media marketing. Now let's move on. Advancing the common good. Now, here's what I felt that every decision is made to achieve a certain objective. And it may be, the objective, it might be, if I made a decision, is it a good one for me, profit-wise or just satisfaction? Or is it a good decision for my family? Or is it a good decision for my city? There are some decisions that are being made that will have an impact on a lot of people. And you would hope that they are the best decisions for the common good. But we didn't know how to measure the common good. So along in 1780s, at the same time that Adam Smith was writing The Wealth of Nations, which was the original basis of economics, Thomas Hobbes was talking and writing about the common good. And here's what he said. When you're going to make a decision that will affect a lot of people, and you want to make the best decision, measure or estimate how many people are made happy by that decision, and how many people are made unhappy by that decision, and ignore those who are indifferent. And if that decision makes more people happy than unhappy, it's a good decision because it has increased the common good. Even though it made some people unhappy, it made more happy, so it has increased the common good. And don't ask if it was an important person made happy or a non-important person made unhappy. No, that's not fair. He did not want to redefine who was made happy. He just took the numbers. He even said that if the people who are made happy by the decision, they should think of perhaps compensating somewhat those who were made unhappy, so they are less unhappy. That also would increase the common good by sharing. And by the way, that's the principle in welfare economics, that a good program is one where those who are hurt can still be compensated by those who are helped to some extent. Okay. So the common good is something that should come up in legislative matters. Now, often there's a company is faced with, a legislature is faced with, let's say, two different decisions, opposite decisions. Both of them cause more happy people to be created than unhappy people? Which one should be used? Well, obvious. It's obvious. The one that had a better ratio of happy to unhappy people. So again, the common good is increased most that way. Now, some of this gets into what we know now as cost-benefit analysis. It's the same thing. When you measure whether, here's an example. McDonald's is considering 2 places to put a new McDonald's store. And the neighbors, some neighbors are unhappy about a store in their location. Others are happy about a store in their location. So the main thing to think of is the store will be profitable anyways, and probably the store will make more people happy than unhappy. But which location would have produced the best ratio, the best benefit cost ratio? And that's what you'll read about in the common good. And I show how it could be applied to not only by businesses, but by governments and nonprofit organizations. Healthcare marketing. The healthcare system of a country is the first thing to ask about, really. Is it working and helping people be healthy? Let's take the system, well, the one I wrote about here is the US. We have a high quality health system. I mean, there are high quality specialists and so on, if you can afford them. But healthcare is quite expensive in our country. It costs 18% of our GDP. And okay, that's a lot. That's almost a fifth of the GDP, 18%. But France has a very good system. So does Germany. And their cost is 12%. Of their health system costs 12% of the GDP. Why is ours 18%? Well, maybe we should look at the performance of the health system. One sign of good health system is that the people in the country are pretty healthy. So which countries have the healthiest people? Interesting question. Well, there's data on that. If you want to rank countries by the amount of healthy people, let's just stick to the top 10 countries with the healthiest people. In every study, all the Nordic countries are listed. Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, and Denmark. They're always listed with the best health systems and healthy people and happy people. My God, does that explain why Professor Kotler is so taken with the Nordic form of capitalism as opposed to the neoliberalist form that capitalism took recently for the last 30 years? I hope you at IIM Ahmedabad and your business school are not teaching neoliberalistic economics and capitalism. That's a perversion. That's when you are saying that the whole purpose of a business is to make the shareholders wealthy. And we are all happy now that an increased number of companies are shifting from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. And finding out, the evidence is clear, that if you want to give the biggest reward to your shareholders, it will come from first giving the biggest award to all your stakeholders, your employees, your partners, suppliers, distributors, who all share in making you a success. And as a result, you get more market share, profit, which goes into the dividends of the shareholders. Read the book called Firms of Endearment I wish I had written that book, but I wasn't invited to. Firms of Endearment is the story of 25 companies that Americans love. They were identified by just going on the street and asking people on the street, is there any company you love and you would miss if it disappeared? Yes. If Apple disappeared, I think, I don't know how I would be sad. If Coca-Cola disappeared, I'd be very sad, etc. So 25 companies like that were studied. And what came out of that is these companies have happier employees, they give them more training. There's less turnover. The profits are higher, 10 times over a 10-year period, 10 to 1, better than the competitors of these companies. Read the book, Firms of Endearment, and it will show you the 8 or 10 signs of great management, including these companies don't even spend much on marketing. You would say, oh, they're great companies because they're big spenders in marketing. No, they satisfy their customers so much that it's their customers who broadcast the company. You don't have to pay for people who are happy with your company to talk about it to their others on Facebook. Yeah, my car is great. I tell everyone that my car is great. Okay. Back to the health organization. It turns out that in the United States, we are number 16 in the rating of our health system. Although it's got quality, but it doesn't have coverage. People have to buy insurance. It's not one of those Nordic systems where everyone's entitled to health. And it's one system. It's a single payer system. We're the only country probably left that requires people to buy health insurance. And of course, that's really hard on the young people who don't get sick. But we tell them they're going to get sick when they're older, so they better pay now. No, it doesn't seem to work that way. So it doesn't have coverage, good coverage, as many people cannot afford it. And even though there is an insurance system to help them, they can't afford it, so they have to just go to the emergency room of a hospital. And we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of diabetes in the U.S. We have a lot of overweight people who are going to have short lives because of overweight. So basically, it's a book to help our hospitals, our pharmaceutical firms, our manufacturers of General Electric and other companies making big image machines. It's how, and doctors in private practice, it's a whole picture and training for people going into healthcare, which is one of our best industries that we need to make work well and make work better. Okay, that's the end, but I'm going to just share with you this thing before we get to questions and answers. Let's see if this works. We don't want wasteful marketing, right? We don't want inane marketing, silly, inane marketing. People just, in broadcasting, you see a lot of it. They become clowns or they use animals to market and so on. We certainly don't want unethical marketing, do we? What we want is H2H marketing. Okay, now what is that? That was a little gimmick for explaining that we try to put in that book human to human marketing and not any of the other 3 bad forms. Well, thank you very much. I see our moderator, and I would be ready to take questions and hopefully supply answers to questions on any of these books, these 7 plus 3 books that I mentioned, or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that insightful session. We'll now be taking a few questions that we've collated from the audience. And they've captured a lot of themes that you touched upon in your insightful talk. So to start off with, you alluded to brands and activism. So having coined the term social marketing, what is your take on the recent surge in focus on ESG related metrics, which is the environmental, social, and governance related metrics that have come to the fore, both from the firms as well as from the investors' perspective?
Well, ESG is so important as a system that can now be accompanied with metrics to measure how responsible companies are being, and even how responsible government is. But I want to then back up a little and say there was a time when shopkeepers and stores and businesses did their jobs well, but never considered social responsibility. That some of them did just because they are humane, but that was not a factor. What started this before we got to ESG was pollution. We found in Pittsburgh, which had a big steel industry, that the people were unhealthy because the air was polluted and they were coughing a lot and dying at a younger age. So we finally got a start of, in a sense of social responsibility, with what we began to call the environmental movement. And the environmental movement covered a lot of other things that companies have to be concerned. Are they treating their workers well? Are their workers working 12 hours, or shouldn't they not work more than 8 hours a day? And child labor, what that's irresponsible to have child labor. So all kinds of things can be defined as helping or hurting others. So I got into that. So I wrote a book called Corporate Social Responsibility with Nancy Lee, and we contacted 42 companies. They were well-known companies, and said, do you give money to anything else or pay attention to anything else besides running a good business? And all of them said yes. All of them told us what they paid some attention to. I said, did you measure were you getting a return for these other things that took away money from the shareholders? I mean, if you're going to be socially responsible, you're giving money away, or you're taking care of wasted products and trying to make the environment better. And generally, it started that way, that companies began to become sensitive to that. As a matter of fact, that goes back to my earlier book on brand activism. Yes, a brand. In that book, we talk about measuring ESG, because we say that a company will have effects beyond its normal work. I mean, even the resources that it uses, plastics, it's wrapping all the packaging is plastic, and it's going into the oceans and killing the fish. So that's irresponsible. So over time, in that book, we complimented the companies and showed what got them into some social responsibility. And then I did some more work on that. But the main thing is, to answer your question, the students will be going into jobs. What kind of job do students at Ahmedabad want? I would bet, of course, we would call your students, we would have called them millennials, maybe you're Generation Z now. But you are different than the people who are running the company, and why those people were hired. They were hired for a different reason. There's 3 or 4 things that students are going to want about their work life. Number one, You want a better balance between your work and your family life, if you're going to have a family, and your friends, a better balance. 2, you would like to be working at a company that has a higher purpose. It does whatever it does well, but it really adds value to the society as well. 3, there's 3 or 4 different things that the millennials and Generation Z are going to look for. And those companies that are not having those traits are going to be, they're going to be finding the names of very good students to hire, but finding out they're getting a no. That these students are going to other companies that are getting a yes. And the companies that are getting a yes on the best people who will become available in the market, the best people who have computer skills or marketing skills or whatever, care about ESG. And that's just a piece of advice to companies, not to you. I think the students know about this, but the companies ought to start taking responsibility for all the layers of impact it has in manufacturing, whatever it's manufacturing, on the resources, on animal life, on nature. We don't want your products to end up in a dump, garbage dump. Actually, I love the company called Patagonia. Patagonia makes clothes. And they say, don't buy any more clothes. You don't need more clothes. I know we make money if you bought it, but why don't you reuse it? Why don't you sew it up? Make it still work. Recycle it. Give it to someone. These things, in fact, we make very good clothes. We don't make something you buy for one wear and throw away. The world suffers from that. Suffers from a clothing industry where most of it is junk after a while. So I'm very interested in your question about companies paying attention and government to ESG as measures of social good, the common good. It's another measure of the common good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So the second question is again alluding to something that you mentioned in your talk. So in this internet era, it is seen that all you need is a social media account to establish yourself as a brand and even as a company. And throughout over the course of your career, again, having seen multiple marketing and branding strategies, would you say it is easier now than ever to market one's business or brand?
Yes. And this is good for students to know too. We call it customer direct marketing, something like that. Any student can start a business now. It's so much easier. I'm not saying it's going to be successful automatically, but you find a group with a need, you set up your website, you will find lots of people who will help you. If you yourself is not a digital person, they're for hire, but you want to form a team, a partner or two, and you're going to go direct to consumers. You're not going through retailing or wholesaling. You are disrupting the market. All this talk about market disruption is true. We are going to be companies will have to live with the fear of being disrupted, bypassed by smaller enterprises, bringing out better solutions at lower cost than they do. So the idea is I don't have to go to get my product on the shelf of a store. I can say, I've got something for you, Mr. or Mrs. Consumer, that will meet your need and the cost, and you can return it, and you'll be getting, and here are testimonials. You can set up the testimonials and everything else. And so opportunities to open new businesses are great now.
Thank you, sir. So again, on a related note, so as people who are just beginning their professional journey, and IIM Ahmedabad in particular is renowned for fostering an entrepreneurial culture in its students. So what would be your advice to this new generation of fledgling entrepreneurs as they go about creating and managing their own brands? And even someone who's even looking to enter a B school at this point of time, what would be your 2 cents of advice to them?
Well, keep this a secret, but our marketing 6.0 is being written with the title Entrepreneurial Marketing. But I can't tell you more. The main thing is I want to run a company with entrepreneurial people. I want everyone working for me to be entrepreneurial. Toyota in Japan tells every worker to practice Kaizen. Kaizen is their word for improving everything every day, if you can, which is to be entrepreneurial. In other words, if you have an idea, get it over to us, get it over to the top people. We want you to be entrepreneurial. Now, some people are not going to be entrepreneurial, so it's overstretching the idea. But if you see yourself as a student who's entrepreneurial, and you really, usually it's in my country, it's the guy who was at the age of 6, he opened a little stand and he sold for 10 cents a little lemonade. And then later on, went to college and ended up selling things that students needed that were not available in the bookshop or the student store. Like a guy named Chuck Percy, who became a senator in the United States, likes to tell the story that in college he was making a fortune just meeting needs of fellow students by finding out sources and putting it together and so on. So you will always have some entrepreneurial students. Now, as you wish they're humane entrepreneurs, some of them get very high and mighty, and people don't want to work with them. There's a certain kind of style, if you are entrepreneurial, so that people talk well of you and not badly about you behind your back about you taking advantage of them or the situation they're in. We don't want the entrepreneur who exploits his friends and goes on to move away from them into bigger things and so on. I don't know how to answer your question. I can't tell you what to read to be more entrepreneurial, except, biographies are very interesting. What you ought to do is of course, you ought to read about Edison. Well, you hope that people like Jeff Bezos would write his biography and learn how a man who just wanted to make books cheaper and more available ended up as the richest man in the world, selling everything. He's going to make a car with his name too, I'm sure. So read about Elon Musk. You don't need the book, just read about what these people have done as entrepreneurs. Some of them will be a model for you if that's the course and the vision you have of yourself. And I'm always impressed with these people.
Thank you, sir. Given that we are almost out of time, would you be open to taking one final question before we wind up?
Certainly.
Sure. So this one is directly from the chat, and it's a short question. So in this era of cutthroat competition, do you think ethical marketing is sustainable?
Ooh, that's a good question too. What do you do if your competitors are unethical. Now, there's so many forms of being unethical. Are they stealing your secret and using your brand name? Are they saying awful things about planting disinformation and stories that would make one concerned about buying any of your products? But do you get back at them by being unethical? That's the issue. No, not at all. You expose what you can. You tell stories about what some competitors are doing that you can back up. You're not making up stories about good competitors. Never make. You should actually talk about your good competitors. In fact, you know what the highest form of graciousness is? When a customer comes to you wanting to buy a car and he likes one of your cars, but he tells you what he wants in the car, and you know yourself that your car doesn't deliver that, and you know your competitor's car is the one for him. You say, I'd love to sell you my car, but frankly, we were beaten by the other company having what you exactly want. But you know, it's just like in a store where you're shopping and putting on a suit. The sales, you say you like the suit very much. The salesman might end up saying, you know, it's not for you. Actually, I don't know if your wife's going to like it, but buy it. But I think I know where you could go for what would give you a really good suit. Now, I'm not saying you keep saying no to people who want to buy from you, but it's a broader mindedness that is remembered and appreciated and comes back as a gift to you later on. So that was my answer to your question.
Thank you, sir. Again, I'm sure us at TRBS as well as the audience would love to go on and have their queries answered by you. But due to paucity of time, we have to wrap up the session now. So again, on behalf of the entire TRBS team, we would like to extend our thankfulness to you, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule to enlighten us with your experience and knowledge. As students who aspire to be business leaders, the learnings from this session, as well as your books, will surely help us in charting our own strategies as well as hopefully brands throughout our professional careers. So thank you. And at the same time, we would also like to take this opportunity to thank our title sponsor, State Bank of India. TRBS 2021 is powered by GRT Jewelers. We would also like to thank Perfetti Van Mel, our business partner, and EW, our knowledge partner.
Thank you very much, and great to know you, and I hope your conference was very successful. I may see some of you